You ever have one of those mornings where you step outside, mug in hand, ready to breathe in your own slice of peace, only to watch it get absolutely wrecked by someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them? That was my life for 3 solid months. I'm Marcus Thompson, union electrician, not exactly the type who's easy to push around. At least, that's what I thought until Karen Whitmore and her white BMW decided my freshly sodded lawn was her private shortcut. Every morning, 7:47 sharp, she'd come barreling across my property like it was the Daytona 500, bluegrass torn up, sprinkler heads mangled, diesel exhaust mixing with my coffee. Yeah, that happened. And you know what else? When I tried to talk to her, she looked me dead in the eye and told me, "It's a free country. Maybe don't plant so close to the road." Now, I'd wired up hospitals and malls for 30 years. I know a thing or two about boundaries and how to make things that last. That's why, when the police shrugged and called it a civil matter, I started thinking less like a homeowner and more like an engineer. The hook? I just found out my actual property line was a full 18 feet further than where her husband, the neighborhood's beloved developer, had moved the markers. She'd been trespassing not by inches, but by a whole car length. So I did what any union guy would do. I engineered a little reality check. Motion sensor floodlights, security cameras, a professionally surveyed, orange spray-painted boundary line. And when that didn't slow her down, I went full Broadway, lights bright enough to bake cookies on her dashboard, a private property, surveillance in use sign she couldn't miss, and video evidence of Karen, dressed like a midnight ninja, kicking over every light I'd installed. That's when Mrs. Patterson, neighborhood legend at 78 and chronicler of Karen's reign, entered the scene with her notebook full of complaints and a plate of chocolate chip cookies. You want a twist? Turns out half the block had stories about Karen, and now we were all comparing notes. Here's where the plot thickens, my insurance guy shows up to inspect the damage and pauses at my corner stakes. "These markers don't match the survey," he says. Lightbulb moment. I dig through county records, and, surprise, Derek Whitmore had filed a correction to the survey right after building his wife's designer retaining wall. My old buddy Pete, now a surveyor, comes by with gear that looks straight out of NASA and proves it. Karen's joyride, her stone wall, even part of her award-winning garden, all sitting on my land. That should have been the end of it. But Karen? She doubled down, threatening, "You have no idea who you're messing with," and filing a blizzard of HOA complaints about my illegal lighting. City code enforcement suddenly drops by with a $1,200 fine, citing unpermitted electrical work, which, by the way, doesn't even require a permit. Let me back up a sec. Dave, the code guy, just so happens to golf with Derek every weekend. Smell that? That's the stench of small-town corruption. With help from Big Jim, my foreman, and Tom, the city's head electrical inspector, we pull the city records. 47 complaints in 18 months, all Karen. Then we find the real smoking gun. Dave had fast-tracked Derek's permits while correcting surveys to give Karen her own little empire. But while Dave is scribbling bogus citations, Tom's inspecting my work and shaking his head. This is museum quality, Marcus. Next thing you know, there's a fire at Derek's construction site. Faulty wiring, no permits, full investigation. The dominoes are lined up. Now, for the permanent solution. I call Miguel at the concrete yard, order up a decorative ballard, 5 feet deep, rebar reinforced, granite cap, legal and unmoving as Everest, planted dead center where Karen's BMW loves to cut the corner. Monday morning, she comes flying in, smashes right into it. The sound? Pure satisfaction. German engineering meets Kentucky concrete. The police arrive, measure, shrug. "Ma'am, you're trespassing. This is a legal landscape feature." Karen, naturally, loses her mind. But here's the kicker. She tries to have the ballard removed by faking a gas leak and hiring a sketchy excavator. Mrs. Patterson gets it all on video, audio included. Karen offering 10 grand to make my monstrosity disappear. Next thing, police are slapping on handcuffs. Fraud, conspiracy, bribery. The works. Even Derek gets caught up. Fake permits, property theft, a tidy little fraud ring. All coming down thanks to one stubborn electrician and a fed-up block of neighbors. The best part? The whole town's watching. At the council meeting, Karen's lawyer blusters about dangerous obstacles and targeted harassment, only to admit, on the record, that Karen's traffic pattern required driving on my land. Cue the FBI. Turns out Derek's survey corrections weren't just for Karen. He'd been stealing slivers of land from 6 other families, over $2 million in value across 4 counties. 6 months later, Karen's in prison, Derek's banned from building, and the HOA? Let's just say their meetings got a lot quieter. I used my settlement to start a community justice fund. Mrs. Patterson runs the show, and our neighborhood, once terrorized by one entitled driver, now pulls together tighter than rebar in a concrete base. Sarah's garden is blooming. The Ballard is a local landmark, and every morning I walk out, breathe in, and think, sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something that lasts. Now, let me ask you, if someone was destroying your little piece of the American dream, would you dig in, or would you let them roll right over you? Drop your worst neighbor or HOA story below, and let's see who's got the wildest ride. Because out here, sometimes all it takes is one deep foundation and a whole lot of community to bring the bullies down. So, you'd think that after Karen's spectacular downfall, things in Millbrook Heights would finally settle into that peaceful small-town rhythm. Morning coffees, friendly waves, maybe a little gossip about who's got the nicest Halloween display. That's what I thought anyway. But, you know how it goes. Sometimes when you finally get a taste of justice, you start noticing just how many other folks around you have been living under the same kind of cloud. And let me tell you, the stories started pouring out faster than cheap concrete in a rainstorm. Turns out, Karen wasn't the only bully in town. She was just the loudest. Over the next couple of weeks, neighbors I barely knew stopped by my porch to share stories that'd make your hair curl. The Hendersons, whose kids hadn't played outside in months because Karen threatened to call animal control on their rescue dog. The Garcias, who lost a full 15 feet of backyard to Derek's survey corrections and were too scared to push back. Even old Mr. Billings down on Oak Street. Turns out, his mailbox had been smashed 6 times since he complained about Derek's construction dust. And every single complaint had quietly disappeared at City Hall, paper trailed right back to the Whitmores. I guess you could say that's when the Millbrook Neighborhood Defense Committee became a real thing. Mrs. Patterson made it official. Weekly meetings at Tony's Hardware, fresh-baked cookies on the counter, and a binder thick enough to make a lawyer weep. Word got around that if you had a problem with a neighbor or a shady contractor, you brought it to us before you brought it to the HOA. Funny thing was, after all the drama, people actually started hanging out together again. Sarah's garden, right next to the famous Ballard, became a kind of unofficial peace park. Kids playing tag, dogs sniffing around, the scent of rosemary and barbecue mixing with the sound of folks swapping stories, sometimes laughing, sometimes shaking their heads in disbelief. But let me tell you, entitlement doesn't go down without a fight. A couple of months after Karen went away, a brand new BMW showed up at the old Whitmore house. A younger guy, suit and tie type, flashing a too bright smile, calls himself Trevor, says he's Derek's nephew, just here to oversee a few property improvements. Day 2, he's knocking on my door with a tape measure and a city permit in hand. Mr. Thompson, I hope you won't mind if we install a new privacy fence along the lot line. Shouldn't take more than a day. That's when my stomach dropped. I glanced at the permit. Looked legit enough. But the boundary line was off by, you guessed it, almost 2 feet. Old habits die hard, right? So I call Pete, who by now is practically family, and we double-check every stake, every marker. Sure enough, Trevor's official boundary line cuts right through Mrs. Patterson's herb garden. Here's where experience pays off. Within the hour, we've got Pete's survey flags planted, Tony and the Garcias out on their lawns, and Mrs. Patterson with her phone ready to record. Trevor steps out, sees the crowd, and suddenly that big city confidence starts slipping. I'm just following orders, he mutters, waving the permit like a white flag. Turns out, the permit itself is real, but the application was filled out with the same fake measurements Derek had used for years. Pete calls the city, Sarah Kim calls the county recorder, and within 48 hours, the permit's pulled, Trevor's gone, and Mrs. Patterson's garden is safe for another season. The real change, though, wasn't about ballads or permits. It was about people finally having each other's backs. Tony started running workshops on how to spot contractor scams. The Garcias organized a block party, first one in 10 years. Dave Henderson set up a WhatsApp group to keep everyone updated on local council meetings, which, by the way, got a lot more interesting after 3 of Karen's old allies suddenly resigned. Sarah, for the first time in months, started sleeping through the night. She planted sunflowers along the edge of the property, tall, cheerful, impossible to miss. Even the city inspector, who used to avoid our block, now stopped by just to check in and chat. And that Ballard? Folks started leaving little painted rocks at its base, tiny messages, names, memories. It became less a symbol of war, more a monument to what happens when regular people stand up for themselves. Still, every community's got its shadows. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the maples, I spotted a black sedan crawling slow past my house, windows tinted dark as secrets. Maybe just a lost driver, maybe not. That night, I sat on my porch with the floodlights on, a mug of coffee in one hand and Sarah's hand in the other, thinking about how quickly peace can slip away if you stop paying attention. So, here's what I learned. Justice isn't something you win once and hang up on the wall. It's something you maintain, one honest conversation, one boundary line, one neighborly favor at a time. There's always going to be another Karen, another Trevor, another shortcut artist thinking they can get away with something. But now, when they try, they're not just facing one tired electrician, they're facing a whole block of folks who finally remember what it means to be a real community. And if you're out there listening, shaking your head at your own HOA horror stories, or wondering if one person can actually make a difference, let me tell you, sometimes it just takes one good foundation to start a movement. That, and a little help from friends who won't let you fight alone. Drop your latest neighborhood drama or property battle down in the comments. Who knows, maybe your story's the next chapter we all need to hear. And if you've got a tip for keeping the peace, share it, because these days, every little bit helps.